Hi, this is Kerry. Today I'm going to be talking about The Hidden Path by Raven Grimassi and Stephanie Taylor with art by Mickie Mueller. This is really part of a set with the well-worn path, and I'll talk a little bit about how they fit together at the end of this video. So once again, The Hidden Path comes with a nice and detailed book. This time they say, the authors, that this book describes the more mystical side, whereas the well-worn path was the sort of foundational aspects, that this hidden deck is more about the more mystical side of things. As I say, the two go together. In this deck and book, one of the things that they've changed is that instead of each card giving an alignment, what they call alignment, which is basically kind of a visualization prompt, they've put those all together in a single story at the end. And so each card simply comes with a divinatory meaning, a teaching, and then what they call the shadow's edge, which they say is a deeper teaching, and reading it sort of sows the seed for those ideas to percolate in your own mind and develop. And once again, for each card, they also have a black and white scan. So you have that for all the cards. Divinatory meaning, teaching, shadow aspect, and then the journey comes later. And is fairly long. I guess once again you could either read it through or record it for yourself. So it starts there and it goes all the way to here. In this deck there's a big focus on the seasonal festivals, and so they also discuss rituals that you can do and how to use the cards as a support in that, which is quite interesting and can be useful. So as I say, they say this looks at the deeper aspects, but fundamentally it was because they didn't get the go-ahead to kind of put the two decks in a single one. However, they come in matching black organza bags, and the backs of both decks are the same. The card size is the same, very easily manageable size for most hands, I would say. I don't have huge hands and I can get my fingers around those quite easily. And once again, the borders and so forth on the cards are also the same, so they will mix together perfectly well. And in this deck, as they say, they're the concepts which are perhaps a bit more mystical. We start with the sacred bough with silver and gold branches at the crossroads, and meet some traditional trees, a fairy door through to the other world, the passage between the worlds, and then the kindred, elven or fairy people who can assist us in our journey as we pass across to the other world. So clearly they're basing themselves on Wiccan ideas, and it's a particular tradition. They admit that it is European paganism, and even within that, the way that I was taught is somewhat different. So each tradition does have different elements, but I think that the cards allow a certain freedom. You don't have to use them exactly the way that they define them or they suggest to use them. For example, I've done meditations and path working with these and done that unguided rather than following their alignment ideas. We also here meet both the Oak King and the Holly King, so there's a little bit more of a masculine emphasis, or an emphasis on the god in this deck. There are things such as sacred site in both spellings of the word, and the idea of a priestess and priest to guide you and initiate you, various ceremonies such as the Great Rite, And then there's a big section of the deck which is about following the seasons. And I think this is rather nice, that it kind of encourages you to think about what the seasons mean to you on many different levels, because obviously if you use these cards in a spread and, you know, Imbolc comes up as the situation now, but it's not that time of year, what does that mean to you? What does Imbolc actually represent? So it does get you to think a little bit deeper perhaps about the seasons and their meanings on many levels, rather than purely just in terms of the time of year and the weather. So then we have 8 different cards which follow this god and goddess statue pairing with altars for the seasons, and these can be used for suggestions of what to do with an altar at the season. So Yule, Imbolc or Candlemas, tree in spring, so we are following the seasons and seeing them in nature as well as in the background around these altars. Ostera, Beltane, tree in summer with a stag, Litha, Lammas, tree in fall, Mabon with a raven, and Soin with a skull. We have the triformis aspect of the goddess. Once again, they don't give specific names to the goddess, but clearly you can put your own preferred deity name to that. There are many triple-formed goddesses. So we have various spiritual aspects to Wiccan practice described here, and concepts such as the fates and karma. And you may or may not agree with their take on these, but I think it's always interesting to read someone's perspective and think about it, and then you can either agree or disagree, and clearly put your own meaning onto the cards if you don't exactly agree with theirs. They do actually recommend journaling, creating a book of shadows, which I was glad to see, given, you know, Raven Grimassi has also written a book of shadows that you can just buy, but they do still encourage you to do your own, which is always a good thing in anything which is teaching about a pagan spiritual path. So I think the card images are very beautiful. Once again, there is a section with these kind of book cards, and it is difficult to express concepts like the 3 great realms in an image. They do a little bit on the side page, there's an image to go with it, but fundamentally they just put it in the book. And so it is a trigger for you to read about it, think about it, consider whether or not it's a useful concept for you or how you interpret it. And as such, I think it's always good to think about these kind of ethical questions, moral questions, deeper concepts. We have the charge of the goddess, mortar and pestle to mix ingredients together. For me, this has a real feeling of the temperance card in tarot, like getting the right mix of ingredients and balancing things out and creating that eclectic mix for yourself. Perfect love and perfect trust. And finally, an oath. As I say, I think these are interesting and useful cards. You may well not agree with everything that the authors say about the different concepts, but it's still an interesting and useful deck to get you thinking, get you meditating, visualizing. It can be used perfectly well for divination, as they say, and just to encourage a focus on thinking about Wiccan concepts. So it's a deck that I think is quite useful, quite interesting, and especially if you can get both decks and mix them together, then you have, instead of a 40 card deck, an 80 card deck. If you can only choose one, the well-worn path is what they consider to be the more foundational aspect, so that would be kind of Wicca 101, and the hidden path might be Wicca 201. But on the other hand, if you want to focus more on the seasons, then you could go straight for the hidden path, because there's a lot of information around the seasons and so forth in that, whereas in the well-worn path, it's there a little bit. For example, they have the Wheel of the Year card, but it's not so much of a focus. So it depends on what information you'd like to look at, what aspects of the craft you'd like to work with. I hope you found this review interesting. Blessed be.